Now, our topic for our sixth session today is vaccine for all, utopia or a possibility. We're going to talk more on this topic with four distinguished speakers that I have with me online here from all around the world. I am going to introduce each one before we start our session. The first is Ms. Ellen Hogue. First, I would also like to remind all speakers, if I pronounce your name wrong, I apologize for that, and please feel free to correct me if I have a mispronunciation here. Ms. Ellen Hogue. Ms. Ellen Hogue is a Senior Policy Manager in Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, or CEPI. Hogue came to CEPI on November 2019 with extensive and broad experience from pharmaceutical industry, carrying expertise on framework and policies for pharmaceutical development, innovation, regulatory, and access to medicines. Good morning to you, Ms. Hogue. Hello, Ms. Hogue. Can you hear me? Well, I'm sure it comes to no surprise when we do events that involve everyone from around the world. Technicalities will also always be something that, of course, we could work on later on. So I will like to say hello to Ms. Hogue. Thank you for joining us, and also we'll try to improve this technicality for now. And I would like to move on to our second speaker, Mr. Meng Wei-ning. Mr. Meng Wei-ning has more than 18 years of experience in biopharmaceutical industry. He obtained his master's degree in 2004 from the University of Queensland. He joined Sinovac since 2007 and has worked as Quality Assurance Manager, International Regulatory Affairs Manager, and Director in Sinovac. Now, under his direction, Sinovac's vaccine has successfully been registered and exported into more than 15 countries. Now, Mr. Meng Wei-ning is the Vice President of Sinovac HK and Senior Director of Overseas Business. Mr. Wei-ning, can you hear me?
I hear you very clearly.
Hi, it's very nice to have you with us today. Thank you, Mr. Wei-ning.
Thank you.
Moving on, I am moving to the third speaker today, Mr. Vladimir Primak. Mr. Vladimir Primak is director at the Russian Direct Investment Fund, or RDIF. Prior to joining RDIF in 2017, Vladimir worked as an executive director at the Private Equity and Special Situations Group at the VTB Capital for 5 years. Now, Mr. Primak was responsible for organization of investment opportunities across a range of industries and managed a number of investment projects from the deal origination and structuring stages to exit. Mr. Primak, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for your introduction and the invitation.
Thank you very much for joining us today. Now we'll talk more. Mr. Primak also has more than 20 years of experience in investments, finance, and management. I'll move on to our next speaker, Mr. Darren Welch. Now, Darren Welch is Director of Global Health at the UK's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. He oversees the UK's investments in the main global health funds and is also responsible for policy and programming related to gender equality. Darren joined the former Department for International Development in 2007, where he had several roles, including running the UK aid program in Tanzania from 2008 to 2011. Mr. Welch, how are you?
Good morning, Timothy. Your pronunciation was perfect. Thank you so much for having me as part of this distinguished panel today. It's a real pleasure. And it's morning here in London, so good morning to everybody.
Good morning to you, Mr. Welch. Thank you very much for joining us today in this session, Vaccine for All. So I would like to go back to Ms. Hogue. Could you hear me, Ms. Hogue?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Hi,
right?
how are you, Ms. Hogue?
Thank you very much. And thank you for the introduction and for the invitation for CEPI to be part of this distinguished panel and conference. We're very honored to be here. Thanks.
It's totally our pleasure, Ms. Hogue. Did I pronounce your name right, Hogue?
You did. Thank you.
Okay.
It's excellent.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Hogue. And so now everyone could listen to us. And now we go straight to the talks because there's a lot that we need to share here. Now, I'm just going to go to you first, Ms. Hogue, with one question about a term that we often hear about, which is vaccine nationalism. Now, can you explain what does this mean, and why can vaccine nationalism be problematic?
Absolutely. Now, the term vaccine nationalism refers to the legitimate need and responsibility of any government to protect its own population. Safe and effective vaccines are the best exit strategy, as you mentioned, out of this pandemic. And right now, vaccine development is ongoing at unprecedented speed and scale. Near 50 vaccine candidates, in which CEPI is involved in 8, are already in clinical development less than a year after the virus was identified, and the results so far look promising. But as Dr. Tedros mentioned, this pandemic is not only a challenge of R&D, but of securing supply and fair allocation, as the global demand in the time ahead is going to outstrip the supply. And this is the reason, as mentioned, why CEPI, together with Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, and the WHO co-created COVAX. The end-to-end endeavor of COVAX has the aim of stopping the most acute phase of the pandemic by the end of 2021 by enabling rapid development and ensuring manufacturing capacity, and also enabling fair allocation. Now, many countries have already signed bilateral agreements with vaccine manufacturers. However, ensuring vaccination within a country is not sufficient to protect its population. As long as the virus is out there, it represents a future threat. So leaving countries without the ability to pay behind is problematic not only for the countries in question, but for the whole world, as the virus does not know borders. And analysis indicate that if vaccines are distributed to high-income countries first, 33% of deaths may be averted. On the other hand, if vaccines were distributed equally based on population, 61% of deaths may be averted. Furthermore, a fair distribution is predicted to be highly cost-effective. So, in other words, fair access for high, middle, and low-income countries alike will save lives, save economies, and allow us to end the pandemic in the best possible way. And as for now, 95 high-income countries have committed to COVAX. In addition to the 92 countries eligible for vaccines through Gavi, this equals 187 economies and represents 90% of the world's population. This is a milestone in global health and a true recognition that this is a global challenge that requires a global solution. And with political will and financial support, COVAX has the ability to turn the tide on vaccine nationalism.
Okay, just a little question to add there. With the number, we have around 200 vaccines being studied right now to face COVID-19. Could we take comfort in this large number, or would it mean nothing to us?
Indeed, I think even the number might be even higher, but as mentioned, a significant number, 200 to 300 vaccine candidates being explored and already near 50 in clinical trials. And as I mentioned, the results that we do see coming in is positive, which gives us hope that we will be able to deliver on the goals of delivering vaccines in unprecedented speed. It has to be said that we do need to continue the trials, we do need to continue the R&D, and the world will need multiple vaccines with different attributes to cover all its needs.
Okay, thank you. Next question is for Mr. Welch. Mr. Welch, could you explain why making equitable, fair, and equal access for the COVID-19 vaccine should be the interest of every country?
Yes, thanks, Timothy. I mean, clearly there's a very strong moral case for this. I mean, in a world where we've signed up to Sustainable Development Goal 3, and that's health and good well-being for all, and we've committed to leave no one behind, it would be unconscionable for us not to have equitable access to these vaccines when they're available. But this isn't just pure altruism. You know, it's also in our enlightened self-interest to act in this way. We want a world which is back up on its feet, where the economy is motoring again, and we see a return to growth. You know, this pandemic is estimated to have cost the global economy $9 trillion this year. So we need to end the pandemic everywhere for everyone if we're to get back to full economic activity. And the UK, as an outward-facing global trading nation, this sees this as a really important thing to achieve, obviously. But we also need to think about the secondary impacts. Over 1 billion children have been out of school as a result of this. 100 to 150 million people are estimated to be pushed back into poverty. 250 million potentially facing food insecurity at the moment, and domestic violence is on the rise as well. So there's all sorts of reasons why we need to act together to end this pandemic. And those problems, those secondary impacts, should concern us all if we want to build a world which is fairer, safer, and more prosperous. So this is why the UK has been such a strong supporter of the multilateral mechanisms. We've heard about ACTA, we've heard about COVAX, both its self-financing facility and its advanced market commitment. We've put in over $700 million to that advanced market commitment, and that's going to support 92 countries to access 1 billion vaccine doses. So as the UK PM put it, unless we unite, ultimately everyone will lose. I think that sums up our position really well. Thank you.
Mr. Welch, just to add to that, how possible do you see that? Of course, everyone wants a vaccine for COVID-19. Everyone realizes how much this has affected everybody's life in the whole world. But how could we ensure that the race is to help humanity recover and not just a race to find the medicine that the whole world wants?
I'm not quite sure I see the distinction you're making there, Timothy. Can you just explain that?
As an industry, that's actually where I'm going there.
So just rephrase that for me.
So how could we ensure that everyone involved in the research of the vaccine is doing it for the recovery of everyone's lives, and not only a race of within the industry?
Yeah, so I think we've seen an amazing set of partnerships, collaboration, and engagement by industry to help end this pandemic. And if you look at the statement, the communique that was put out by the CEOs of, I think, 16 of the leading pharmaceutical companies around the UN General Assembly, there was very strong commitment there to make sure that a vaccine is made affordable for everybody and that it is distributed quickly and equitably. I think there are really good signs that industry is doing this in a way which is going to help us bring the pandemic to an end fairly and as quickly as is humanly possible. The challenges remain, of course.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Welch. I'm moving on to Mr. Wei Ning. Now, we'd like to hear from Sinovac, where Sinovac, Mr. Wei Ning, has an interesting business model, which is business to business, or B2B, with the Indonesian state-owned company Biopharma. Now, despite this being a B2B model, how do we ensure that people, especially those coming from the lower income, can get these vaccines as well?
Yeah. Actually, at the very beginning, the collaboration between us with Biopharma, actually, we tried to through this collaboration to solve some issues. And first one is it's about the phase 3 clinical studies. So we started the development for this vaccine since the beginning of this year, but we got the major data from phase 1, phase 2 in June. After that, we need go on for phase 3. But we found there's no cases in China, so we have to find the place where has viral circulating to conduct phase 3. And so we tried a different approach, and by collaboration with the vaccine manufacturer is one of them. And so we collaborate with Biopharma and conduct the phase 3 in Indonesia. So that is from Sinovac aspect. And another some issues regarding the production capacity. So currently we already have more than 300 million doses per year capacity, but the bottleneck is the filling and packaging. And meanwhile, our partner like Biopharma, Butantan, they have a huge filling and packaging capacities. So by collaboration with them, we can fully take use of this filling and packaging capacity. That means that we can easily to increase the capacity. You know, Indonesia is a big there's a big population in Indonesia. It's more than 250 million population.
Yes.
And to rely on the supply, the doses, especially single doses, in the syringe, from outside, there will be a huge work because there's a lot of burdens for the logistic. So by this collaboration between the two manufacturers, we can solve this in some way. And another aspect, by the collaboration with the Biopharma, actually we also can lower down the production cost. And you know, in China, we produce the single dose presentation for these vaccines, but in Biopharma, we can produce the multi-dose presentations. By this way, also we can lower down the production cost. And plus, we also can save a lot of cost during the coming from the delivery process. So basically, by this collaboration, and actually we can increase accessibility and also affordability for these vaccines. And I think this is the fundamentals conditions for the no matter it's poor people or other people's get vaccines. So as long as we have enough vaccine available for these countries, that will be possible for different group and get vaccine. Over. Thank you.
Now, phase 3 is still going on right now for Sinovac vaccines. Would you share with us, is there an update on the timeline? And if you said that you could lower the costs, there's a possibility of that by working with Biopharma. Do you have an estimation of how much that would be?
The phase 3 trial now running quite well. And we are running phase 3 in Indonesia, also in Brazil, also in Turkey. And next week, our phase 3 will be also triggered in Chile. And I think the major trial is in Brazil is running quite well. I guess maybe next month we'll have the data available. I hope so. And regarding the lower cost, so normally you know, the bulk or ready to fill bulk, the production cost for this is 50-60% of the total production. And so by supplying the ready-to-fill bulk to a partner in Indonesia here, obviously we can lower down that part, and also we can save the delivery cost. For example, you know, the vaccine could be approved in the beginning of next year, and but during that period, I think several vaccines will be approved. And then you can imagine how difficult it is and to deliver the vaccine, because every country wants vaccines, and the most of the vaccine have to deliver by the airplane, and so there will be a huge burdens. And considering this is the damage COVID-19 pandemic already did to the logistics system globally, so. By this way, we also can save the delivery cost. So I cannot give exact number, but that's for sure. We can save a certain percentage of the cost from the vaccines.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wenning. Next question is for Mr. Vladimir Primak. Now, Mr. Primak, there's a widespread expectation that once we have the vaccine, this will solve the whole pandemic altogether and protect people from the virus. Now, We know that Dr. Tedros, the Director General of WHO, has said that the vaccine itself will not end the pandemic, and scientists have warned that vaccines will not be the silver bullet for our problem here. Now, what is your thought on this?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for your question. I would not obviously argue with the head of WHO. At the same time, I would be glad to share my views. And firstly, let me explain why I'm here in the first place. Russia Direct Investment Fund is a representative of Gamaleya Institute, which has created the Sputnik vaccine, which has been the first registered since August in Russia, at least. And we are representing them globally in terms of production and sales. We believe that past is a good indicator of the present and sometimes future. And in the past, this is not, since this is not the first pandemic, this is not the first virus which creates global havoc, not to such an extent, but there were problems in the past, and these problems have been resolved with vaccination. Frankly speaking, most probably the pandemic might not be finished with the vaccination, but there would be a considerable improvement, especially in the places where the vaccination will happen. The vaccine alternatives, the alternatives to vaccination are even more complex and burdensome to the economy, to the people, and to the freedom of movement, or lots of restrictions which the people don't want to have. Therefore, the vaccination may be not the best solution, but there's no better. Besides, the vaccines are already created. We are on the final stages of third phase of clinical trials. A number of other vaccines globally are also finalizing third phases. The formalities need to be, of course, completed, and the improvements in terms of production, logistics should be arranged, but the vaccines technologically are already invented. Another question is how quickly this vaccination could be held. And there is a responsibility needed in terms of people who are already vaccinated, so it doesn't resolve the problem immediately. There is a need for time for antibodies to be produced, for T lymphocytes to be produced, and it's actually a number of weeks. So usually people get safe after more than a month after the first vaccination. Usually there are 2 vaccinations, so at least a month, and people need to be safe during that time. So it will take time, but most probably, considering lots of challenges on the production side, on the logistics side, cold chain logistics side globally, and in some areas of the world in terms of affordability, we believe it will take many months before this situation improves. Meanwhile, I hope that regulators globally will try to adapt to the situation. This is very unusual. The scale is unprecedented, and of course, the processes need to be expedited on WHO level and regional registration level. Thank you very much. I think vaccination is the best of the alternatives so far.
All right, thank you, Mr. Primak. Now, I would just like to add to that question. Russia's Sputnik 5 is probably the earliest that we've heard about a vaccine being used, and also within the third phase. But also we've heard that it is already being used in Russia. Now, could you update us on how how is the situation now? How far are you from mass production, and also on actually sharing this vaccine also with maybe other countries as well?
Yes, thank you. So as it is published in the international press, of course, in the Lancet journal, we have completed with first and second phase of clinical trials back in the beginning of August, and the third phase of clinical trials together with clinical research organization globally being arranged and finalized in Russia and several other countries. The interim results of that will be ready within the next few weeks. More than 20,000 people already received injections. The preliminary data on safety, immunogenicity, and efficacy received and recently published some of them. We believe that within the next few weeks there will be more detailed reports. We think that the production on the certain scale has already started, and the risk group of population in Russia are already being vaccinated, but massively the supply is expected starting from December, January. And of course, there is a big challenge in terms of mass scale production, because there is a huge demand globally, and there are lots of challenges, not only for us, but for other producers as well, to deal with logistically and in terms of expansion of production. So we hope that starting from the first quarter, there will be massive supplies from Russia and other producers, which will help to resolve the situation globally.
Has logistics been a problem? Because this is what we hear. Once the vaccine is produced, logistics could be the next big problem that we will be facing.
For sure. Well, the cold chain logistics is needed. For us, it is less of a problem. We have like liquid form is -18, -20, and the lyophilized dry form is +2, +8. There are some producers which require extreme cold temperatures like -70, which is a big challenge. But a number of producers are also in the same range of temperatures as we are, and respectively, there is a lack of such cold chain logistics facilities. Of course, the airplanes needs to be used. Lots of other facilities, especially in the warm countries, but actually everywhere in the world, especially in the countries with lack of such infrastructure. So this is a task for all the countries to create such infrastructure if it doesn't exist yet.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Primack. Now, I'll just throw questions randomly here. I mean, I'll just get the answers from each one of you, not from each one of you, but I'll just appoint. And if you do want to add to any question or answer any question, please feel free to do so. Just let me know. But this first question, I'd like Ms. Hogue to answer this first question, which is about, we know that certain countries already have initiatives and also agreements with other countries, as we have like Indonesia with China and Sinovac and other countries as well. Now, what will happen to other countries, or would I say here poorer countries who do not have agreements like this and do not have the funds to acquire the vaccines immediately once the vaccine is out?
No, that's the key question, right? And that is also the key reason for establishing COVAX. So as mentioned, 92 countries have been identified as eligible for receiving vaccine through the Gavi Advanced Marketing Commitment. And I think indeed that, you know, the fact that also 95 high-income countries have signed up to and committed to support the COVAX fair allocation mechanisms and principles gives hope that there is political will and funding that can be found to ensure that this is distributed in equal manners to high, low, and middle-income countries alike.
If you would like to add, Mr. Welch, what would be your answer to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's our strong hope and expectation, actually, that there won't be any countries which are excluded from this vaccine. You know, as Elena said, that's exactly the reason why the COVAX Advanced Market Commitment has been established and is mobilizing resources to get 1 billion doses out to the most vulnerable people in 92 countries. I think it's also worth mentioning that the international financial institutions are really stepping up and helping with this effort as well. So our Foreign Secretary hosted an event in the margins of the UN General Assembly on vaccines. And at that event, the World Bank announced that it would be committing up to $12 billion to support countries to access vaccines, therapeutics and diagnostics as well. So there's a major global effort underway, and we've very much got at the forefront of our minds the needs of poorer countries, and we've put the mechanisms in place to make sure that the vaccine can reach them. And I should mention as well that pay tribute to the Australian government, which has also announced $500 million Australian dollars to support vaccine distribution and procurement in the Pacific region. So lots of effort underway.
Now, if I zoom in even more to the countries itself, now some countries, maybe middle-income countries, might have a different situation where it's not really a poor country, it's middle income, but if we zoom in, there are groups of people who are actually poor there with lower income and those who have more funds to access the vaccines. Now, how could we ensure that the vaccine for all also applies to these different groups within each country? Mr. Welch?
Sorry, yes, you want to, okay. Well, I think what we are very much proposing is we have a science-led approach to the distribution of the vaccine in countries, and we know that advice is coming on that. And we would want to see countries apply an evidence-driven, science-based approach to make sure that the vaccine goes to the most vulnerable groups, and that should be done on the basis of vulnerability rather than ability to pay. I mean, countries will need to make their own kind of policies on how they roll out the vaccines, but that would very much be the approach that we would want to say and that we know the WHO and others are proposing.
Ms. Hogue, if you'd like to add to that?
I think just to say that also back to the fact that through COVAX we intend to distribute or enable to distribute, as Darian said, 950 billion doses to LMICs particularly, and hoping that also would enable them to take care of their risk populations in the best way, in an evidence-based way, as Darian says. And indeed, COSEPI, through its investments and partnerships, have secured the first right of refusal for over 1 billion doses to the facility, to the COVAX facility already, so that we are hopeful that that can happen.
Okay, I move on to Mr. Wenning. Now, we know that certain companies have also already claimed a success rate of higher than 95%, and we will probably see more of that in the future, which is a good thing. If we're talking in general, of course, everybody wants to find a vaccine as soon as possible. Now, what would it mean if there are companies who are not really beating, but faster in achieving the rates that they expected? What would it mean to Sinovac?
Well, actually, currently already have a couple of companies have a very good data regarding the efficacy data. Actually, they encourage the whole industry and also encourage us. And we see the vaccine does work, and this is good things. And this also give us a lot of confidence. So that means that also for others vaccines is also high possibility to be success. So I think to against this COVID-19 pandemic, only 1 or 2 or 3 vaccine is totally not enough, and so the whole world need different more vaccine, also different kind of vaccines, and with different characters. And for example, some vaccines with a quite strict storage condition, maybe this kind of vaccine will be hard to use in some not well developed area because the very strict logistic requirement. But some vaccine maybe not that the storage condition not that strict, and that will be easily to used in such areas. So the worst is different, and we really hope by by working together and by collaboration with other partners in the industries, we can also provide vaccine as soon as possible. We also hope from our others colleague, the colleague from others manufacturers also can be very successful for the vaccine development, so against this COVID-19.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Waning. Now, there's an interesting question from our viewers here. I'll just go to some of the questions that we have received. Interesting. So I would like to know everyone's thoughts on this question. I'd go to Mr. Primack first. Is it feasible to consider a vaccine as an instrument of power at this moment?
Well, firstly, it is an instrument of medicine, and this is an instrument to resolve the pandemic situation. In terms of instruments of power, we do not consider that. Of course, there is an instrument. It's an instrument of prestige, maybe yes, but there is nothing wrong about that. The question is, of course, that it should be properly researched. It should be proven to be safe, efficient, and otherwise, the element of this is just additional push to do the processes faster and in more efficient way. However, in terms of power, I don't see, frankly speaking, any substantial power. Soft power, maybe, but this is not an instrument which would anyhow damage anyone in the world.
Thank you, Mr. Primack. I'd go to Mr. Welch. What would you say about this?
Yeah, no, I'd like to agree with my Russian colleague, actually. I don't think the vaccine should be seen in this way as an instrument of power. I mean, naturally, people will have pride in what their institutions or countries are doing, but I don't think it should be seen as an instrument of power.
But would you think there would be a possibility that it would be treated that way, although it should not be seen that way?
I think that it would be looked on very poorly if that was how countries sought to use a vaccine when we're facing this sort of global crisis. I think history would look very poorly on that, actually, and any short-term gain would be, potentially over years, there would be consequences from that. So I don't think people would approach it in that way. I mean, what I would want to say, is that the COVAX facility, that has been specifically designed to promote and enable global collaboration on vaccines. It's a way of sidestepping kind of issues of geopolitics and enabling everybody to join and have the same access to the vaccines that are procured through that mechanism.
All right, thank you, Mr. Welch. Ms. Hogue, what is your thought on this?
Just adding to that, I think without doubt, right, the vaccine is a very powerful tool. It's the most powerful tool versus this pandemic. But I do think that the great support that we are indeed seeing for COVAX is the best testimony that this will not be used as a geopolitical tool.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Waning?
Yeah, well, I think as a vaccine developer or manufacturers, the most important role for us currently is make the vaccine successful and increasing the affordability and make more and more vaccines available to the population in the world. And so from the point of us is our mission is to use the vaccine to eliminate human disease. So I think no matter it's power or not, the most important is the vaccine could be used for the population who really need it.
Now, I'm sure everyone is fairly familiar to the geopolitical situation between multiple countries in the world. We know some countries are more friendly to others, and some have probably more tensions with other countries compared to their neighbors or other countries as well. Now, how much do you think the geopolitical situation itself will determine who gets whose vaccine? I'd like to go to Ms. Hogue to analyze this.
I think that in this time of unprecedented crisis that we now are seeing, it's natural. There are both different views on the response and how to move forward. But again, I do think that we are seeing a quite unique global will to collaborate and global will to find solutions to avoid factors as that becoming the key rationale for the distribution and the allocation of the vaccines. We all want to end this pandemic as quickly as possible, but we might choose different ways to get there. It's a time to be pragmatic and to choose collaboration, and COVAX is the best testimony that this might happen.
And it's always, at least so far that you've seen, everybody's been very friendly about this, about actually getting together and looking for a solution together.
Sorry, yes, absolutely. I think, as mentioned, 187 countries, which represents more than 90% of the global population. That is indeed a milestone in global health.
Okay. Mr. Welch, what is your thought on this?
Yeah, I very much agree with what Eleanor said. I mean, look, many influential countries are involved in vaccine research, and that's a great thing. We need different approaches and technologies, and we've heard today about some of the impressive work that's underway in a number of countries represented here. India too, I mean, a powerhouse of vaccine manufacturing. And there's sometimes a bit of political noise, but if you set that aside, this is ultimately a scientific global endeavor. So we need to get that transparency, scientific rigor, and we've got the mechanisms now to have collaboration. There's been an astonishing degree of global collaboration. Getting something like COVAX up and running in a short period of time has been really astonishing. I mean, unprecedented. And plans are already being put in place to roll out this vaccine, and there is support to countries to help with those rollout plans when we get the vaccines fully available. So I think we're in a really good place, actually.
Okay. Mr. Weining, what would your thought be on that, especially since you also represent Sinovac from China? Is there any effect of the geopolitical situation in providing the vaccine?
Yeah, well, at the beginning, I mentioned that actually the world need not only one or two vaccine. They need several, a lot, maybe as many as possible. So for each single vaccine, it's not cannot cover the whole world. That for sure. And from us, actually, we have a collaboration with Indonesia, with Biopharma. We also have a similar collaboration with Butantan in Brazil. And you can see when we trying to collaborate, that means in the future we're trying to enter the market, is the most important is select. So first is with the huge population. So Indonesia has 270 million, and Brazil have 200 million. And so by collaboration with them, we can serve the big market and supply the vaccine to those the countries. And by this way, we cover the certain populations. We are not considering what this area is close to China or not. So I think for other manufacturers, they also have their strategies and to collaborate and to supply the vaccines and to cover the market. So to sum up, if we have more vaccine available, and for example, at the first quarter of next year, we have 10 to 20 vaccine available, then we don't have such question available. So that is the key.
All right, thank you, Mr. Weining. Mr. Primack, it's interesting to hear from you. How do you see this would affect the geopolitical situation now?
Of course, the better the relationship between the countries, the faster the cooperation goes on all the levels. So, but to improve the relationship, it is actually vital to have the topics for this improvement. The vaccine is actually one of those topics which can be mutually considered. as a potential for the improvement of relationship. We are trying to work globally from the with our vaccine. Of course, it is faster to do where the relationship is warmer, but we do not see any restrictions in terms of working with any country in the world. We hope that whatever the differences are politically, that should not impact the cooperation in the field which is needed for everyone.
All right, thank you, Mr. Freiman.
I
have a question.
In all ways, yeah.
I see. I have a question here from the audience to Mr. Welch. The question is, BBC has exposed the failures of the UK contact tracing system. How will this impact UK's vaccine distribution given the problems in the UK's most vital pandemic response tool? Mr. Welch.
Yeah, thanks. That's not a part of the government that I work with, but I can tell you that plans for rolling out the vaccine are well underway here in the UK. As you'd expect, as they will be in other countries as well. But I'm not going to comment on kind of the details of the particular track and trace system.
Okay, thank you.
I think, sorry, what I will say is we have a number of reviews underway globally. I think there are lessons for many countries to learn. And one of the things we're really keen to do is to make sure that we all collaborate in order to build back better. This won't be the last pandemic we face, as others have commented, and we have a real opportunity to strengthen health systems around the world and to prepare ourselves much better for when we face these sort of challenges in the future. And that's one of the reasons our Prime Minister has set out his ambitions for a 5-point plan for better global preparedness for the next pandemics. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Thank you for answering that, Mr. Welch. Now, also a question from the audience. I'll just rephrase this a little bit. How, as we know, in economy, when demands are high, prices are also high, and there has probably not been something more demanded than a vaccine in our lifetime, I guess, right now. So how can you ensure that even though the demands are very high, everybody's racing for a vaccine, that you could still ensure that the vaccine is provided as cheap as possible for the masses? Ms. Hogue, would you like to answer this?
Yes, absolutely. And again, you know, the whole concept and idea about COVAX is to achieve collaboration both around investments and risk sharing in development, but also then on strengthening the procurement tools and do a joint procurement on behalf of all participating countries. And that also implies Gavi with the negotiation rights with the companies to ensure that we can get the best prices. And indeed, there is a tiered pricing model to ensure that their power in negotiation of that.
Okay, Mr. Weining, if you would like to go through this as well, especially from those who will be producing the vaccine, how could you ensure that the price given later on is also the cheapest price, and this was not considering profit, but considering about finding a cure for a situation that the world is facing?
Okay. Firstly, I would like to say, actually, the vaccine will be produced from manufacturers, from the commercial companies. So those companies do need profit, that for sure.
Yes.
And we cannot produce the vaccines with zero profit. Well, if that is the case, in the next pandemic, there will be no vaccine available. And but the key is to balance the profit with also because this is the public good and not like a normal commercial product. And so from a company, we are also willing to, and through the different collaboration and through different model, and to lower down the production cost and make sure the vaccine price will be as low as possible. So that is why we have the collaboration with the different manufacturers, and that is also by these collaborations, we can lower down the cost from some part, from the local filling packaging, and from the packaging materials, and then from the logistic arrangement. By those things, we can lower down the price and make sure, and finally the vaccine price can be assessed and to increase affordable in different countries.
Okay, now I only have a few minutes left. I would like to give this chance to all speakers to give a closing remark. What I would like to touch upon is there's so much expectation towards the vaccine. There is so much information and sometimes misleading information about the vaccine. Now, I'm sure everyone here has their own concerns on what misleading information is spread out there, or what misleading assumption that everyone might have, considering that everyone is thinking about a vaccine. Some people think that it's a silver bullet. Some people know that it's not a silver bullet, but still would like to know, how would this affect my life? So I would like to give everyone a short time to really touch upon your biggest concern and how you would like to address that. I would like to give the first chance to Ms. Hoig, please.
Thank you. No, indeed. I mean, we've spoken a lot about how we are historically well positioned to make sure that we both can deliver vaccines rapidly, but also distribute them and allocate them in a reasonable way. But a vaccine will never be truly useful unless people are willing to accept it and take it, and we achieve high coverage rates. So I do think that you're touching upon the most important thing, and that is making sure that these vaccines have a robust safety and efficacy profile, and that we talk with truthfulness and openness and transparency around any side events that might occur, and just make sure that our communication towards the public is truly balanced. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Hoig. Moving on to Mr. Welch.
Yes. Thanks. So a couple of closing remarks. I mean, vaccines work. We've got fantastic global experience. You think about how close we are to ending polio, eradicating polio worldwide. You look at the fantastic work that we do through Gavi. They work, and they are a fantastic public health investment. You get a really good rate of return on vaccines. And we've got a huge global opportunity to show collaboration and solidarity. I mean, this is a real moment of test for the global community, and that's why we're so strongly supporting COVAX and those collaborative mechanisms, and we call on others to get behind them, show that global solidarity. I think the misinformation point is really important. It's dangerous, and we need to tackle that. We need to be transparent, we need to be honest, and we need to have a science-led approach. Only that way will we build the confidence and trust of the public that will enable us to get the best benefits we possibly can from all these investments we're making in vaccines. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Welch. I'll give the chance to Mr. Primack, please.
Yes, I totally agree with the speakers before me, and the biggest concern is actually to avoid the misinformation campaigns and to avoid unfair competition using this misinformation. Of course, there are different commercial interests from different parties in the world, but that should not hamper the main task to resolve the problem of coronavirus globally. So the objective information is vital and critical, and we hope that the global media will act responsibly.
All right, thank you, Mr. Primack. To Mr. Meng Wei-ning, please.
Yeah, I also think, actually, currently, I'm very confident about the vaccine of COVID-19. So I think in the next couple of weeks, there will be more vaccine with the data available. I mean, the efficacy data. So that means that in the first quarter of next year, there will be more vaccine. There will be several vaccines will be approved in the world to be used. So next, the most concern is the information transparent information. It should be sharing to the globally, and to not leading the people's awareness about the vaccines. And the vaccine, I'm confident about the vaccine does work, but the development of vaccines is just one part, and after that the distribution and administration of vaccine is also huge work and followed. So we should work hard.
All right, thank you, Mr. Weining. Thank you to all speakers. Seriously, thank you very much, everyone. I'm sorry if my questions were gloomy. I promise you, I'm just being gloomy to answer some questions that cloud us. But I'm so glad from the answers that everyone has given here, we could see a brighter light at the end, and we could have hope of that, and hope that everyone could receive it. Vaccine for all. Once again, thank you very much, Ms. Hug. Thank you very much, Mr. Welch, Mr. Weining, and also Mr. Primack. And also a special thank you to Dr. Tedros, the Director General of the WHO, for opening our session today. And thank you very much, everyone who has been involved in this session. I hope that the information that we have shared in this session has been useful, and that it could give you a clearer view on how this vaccine situation is in the world, and how much we need to work together and to provide vaccine for all if we want to regain the quality of life as we know it, or even better in the future after COVID-19. Now, I'm Timothy Marbun. Thank you very much for joining me in this 6th session. Now we go back to our event today.